Vishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Tadamayam Dadati Swapadamikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yudapadakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavam Shah Shri Rupam Sarvajatam Sadhana Raghunatham Vidantam Sajivam Sarvaitam Savadutam Parijanam Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Balam Sahana Lalita Shri Vishakam Shah He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Deenabandhu Jagapate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tata Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranami Kalipriye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyeva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So, I want to start off with a little bit of a question for everybody, or at least for those who have an idea. What do Vaishnav devotees do? Just throw out ideas.
Distribute books.
Distribute books. There you go. That's good. What else do devotees do? We just kind of did it for about an hour and 15 minutes.
Chant.
Chant.
Chant the holy name.
Chant the holy names. What else what are devotees known for?
Really good prashadam.
Really good prashadam. Yes.
Vegetarian.
Vegetarian. Good. So our diet, prashadam. If you were back in the 60s and 70s, we were crawling all over the airports. So there are things that devotees are known to do, and things that they like to do. All these different reading, singing, chanting, feasting. Those are things that devotees like to do. But okay, that's what a Hare Krishna devotee does. But now I want to flip that, and we're going to think a little differently. What do you all enjoy? So take a moment, think about yourself. Not as like spiritually, what do I like to do? Like I really, just think you personally. So for example, I like to play soccer. I like doing sports. So it doesn't have to be something spiritual, but think about that for a minute, and then feel free to go ahead and share. Like this is how you build community. You actually get to know the person besides I chant X amount of rounds and I do this in the kitchen. Let's go, Linda.
I like music.
You like music, just the art of music. Awesome.
Movies.
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 What else? And be honest, don't worry. No one is going to judge you for whatever you like. Yes.
I like coloring.
You like what?
Coloring.
Coloring. See, there you go. Everyone loves art. Yes.
Like channeling spirit.
Anyone? Yes.
I like to cook.
Love to cook.
Spending time with family.
Spending time with family. Yes.
Looking at art.
Looking at art. So it's not one thing to make art, but also appreciating art. It can be something very enjoyable. What else? Anyone else? Yes. You like to crochet. Anyone in the back? Yes.
Prasadam.
Prashadam. It's like eating again. Eating.
Looking at the ocean.
Looking at the ocean. So like taking in natural scenery. Yeah. Anyone else? Yes.
I like going to the gym.
Going to the gym. Yes. Okay. That is all perfect. So what I want you to do, take those thoughts of what you as a person like and enjoy, put that in the back of your mind for now. But we're going to circle back onto those later. So now we're going to go get your expedition caps on. We're going to actually start to dive into today's topic. I like history. Both prehistory, like past history, also the natural world. I love studying and understanding these things and how these work and interact and how they affect us today. And archaeology, although I don't specialize in archaeology, I specialize in wildlife biology, but I always understanding archaeology and how it impacts the humanity today. I really find interesting in reading about it and studying it. In places I've worked at archaeological sites in the past, so this stuff really does intrigue me. But I can have a grasp, but when most people hear the word archaeology, the first thing that usually comes to mind is Indiana Jones and cinema. Just the very Hollywood's single pigeonhole view of what archaeologists do. It belongs in a museum. But if we actually, let's take the classic, what's the dictionary definition of archaeology, and we look at what it is as a study, as a field. Archaeology is basically the study of the past through material remains that are left behind. That could be architecture in terms of remains or ruins, but it also can be texts, transcripts, or even oral history as well, studying cultures that have still been practicing and passing down oral tradition over many, many generations. All of this is the study of humans past, archaeology. Well, that's cool. It's a pretty good table conversation topic, but now, let's find a way to spiritualize it. Let's find a way to learn about spiritual archaeology. And through doing this, something that we already do on Wednesdays is we have readings on Chaitanya Charitamrita. And this text, compiled by Krsna Kaviraj in the late 1500s, this synopsis of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is on the altar, and we'll touch on him throughout the class, there are many different instances throughout the text where we actually find that there are spiritual archaeologists, people in our tradition that basically do this study of the past. So it's a way to appreciate something that I enjoy, but I can now bring it to a spiritual context, to my practice of bhakti, and something that I'm going to share with you all today. So the way this is going to work, as we flip through the pages of the Chaitanya Bhagavat, we're going to look at this wisdom of discovery that is found by our spiritual archaeologists in our tradition, in our sampradaya. So we first have to understand who are the archaeologists in our sampradaya, or this disciplic succession of gurus who have passed down their knowledge to the next disciple. We have to understand where they're excavating and looking and excavating and exploring. We also have to understand what they're actually finding, and then of course we have to see how are those findings significant to us in the modern day. So, make sure your passports are ready, you have your visas, unless you're already an Indian citizen, then you're good, because we are heading off to India. Now, specifically when we land in India and look at our archaeologists in our past, I think there's no better person to look at as an archaeologist in our tradition than the Lord himself, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Mahaprabhu actually has an extensive history of going around the entire Indian subcontinent and excavating many special places that are significant to Vaishnavas, devotees, to this modern day. So, as we go through these different places, keep in mind these are not in sequence in time, but more so just significant places that he has discovered. First off, we want to go to Aritagram, and this is roughly around 1550 CE. For those of you who are not familiar with CE, CE is the modern equivalent of AD and BC. So this would be 1550 AD. So, in Aritagram, Mahaprabhu is in the Vrindavan area, and he is actually underneath a giant tree meditating. And he is meditating on a certain area where he is hearing these water from these two local spring heads. And next to him, he has his disciple, Rupa Goswami, who is observing this the whole time. And Mahaprabhu, upon hearing the splash of these two water bodies, he goes to them, and after he's leaving this gigantic tree, he goes towards these water bodies, touches the water, and then he is able to realize that these two water bodies are significant. The two water bodies that are right next to each other he finds are Shamakund and Radhakund, which had been lost to the world for thousands of years. Unknown. People, the local residents of Vrindavan walking by these two ponds, so they just thought there were two springs that were next to each other, bubbling up from that grassland. But because Mahaprabhu is Radha and Krishna together, he's able to identify Shamakund and Radhakund, because Krishna dug Shamakund, Radharani dug Radhakund. So obviously he's going to recognize the two kunds that he himself dug. So he goes forth and he starts bathing in these two waters, relishing the love that is within them. And then Raghunath Das Goswami is watching this the entire time, completely absorbed in happiness, watching his spiritual master and his Lord, Lord Chaitanya, bathing in these transcendental spiritual waters. And then Mahaprabhu instructs Raghunath Das Goswami, excavate, establish these places as a holy place of pilgrimage. And so, now in the modern day, you can go on pilgrimage to Vrindavan, to go to Radhakund and Shyamakund, and you can actually see these two water bodies. And through this process, they were able to excavate with the help of local merchants who were passing through the area, using that wealth to fully fix around the entire kunds so that all edges of the lakes are accessible for pilgrims, right next to each other. And then, of course, when you go, you can then meditate on the beautiful pastime that happens. So, for those of you who are not familiar with this pastime, I'll just give a very quick synopsis of what happens. It's a very in-depth pastime, and luckily we do record these classes, and if you want to actually hear the more in-depth detail of it, feel free to go back onto our YouTube channel to see the full coverage of what Radhakund is. But essentially, it is a pastime site where Krishna just defeated a bull demon. And in Vedic culture, killing a cow is arguably the most sinful thing you could do because the cow is viewed as one of our mothers. It provides for us, and the bull is viewed as a father. While the cow provides milk for sustaining us, the bull provides its strength to plow agricultural fields and provides grain. Through the cow and the bull, you get all the food that you need to survive. So the act of killing a bull is the worst possible thing you could do. So Krishna killed a bull. Bull was actually a demon in the form of bull. But Radharani jokingly told him as he was coming to embrace her, "You cannot touch me. You just killed a cow. Go clean yourself." So Krishna says, fine. Being the supreme person, he just goes to the ground, takes the heel of his foot and slams it into the ground, makes a little hole. That hole grows, and he calls all the sacred rivers and lakes of the entire world into one spot, including the Ganges. He then takes his dip, washes himself off, comes out to Radharani and says, "Look, I'm clean." But Radharani is the only person who can order Krishna around. She plays coy with him, and she says, "I can do better." So her and all of her girlfriends, the cowherd girls, they go right next to Krishna's pond. They start to dig their own lake with their bangles and their long earrings and just dig with these little metal instruments until they build a pond, and it slowly fills with water. And then Krishna is seeing this the entire time, this labor of love that they're ultimately doing. Obviously, it's done sarcastically to tease Krishna, but Krishna knows Radharani, and Radharani knows Krishna. They have that type of relationship. And Krishna asks for permission to bathe, and he calls all the waters into her pond. And then Radharani, after keeping Krishna on the ropes in the pseudo-spiritual doghouse, says, "Okay." And then Krishna declares that this place that you have dug is the most sacred place in the entire universe. Not even the topmost planets in the universe or anywhere else can match this lake because of the love that you have done out of it for me. And that's how you have Radhakund and Shyamakund right next to each other. But that's just one special place that has been excavated by the Goswamis and Mahaprabhu that is significant to us. But Mahaprabhu has done a lot. As I mentioned, he has traveled all across India. And during his pilgrimages to holy places, he heads down towards South India, specifically the province of Tamil Nadu. Now, down in South India, after actually dispatching some bandits who tried to attack him, but as soon as they came close to him, they dropped their weapons and just ran away in terror. He goes and takes a bath in a local river, and then he goes to a temple. Specifically, he goes into the Adikeshwar temple. And inside the temple, after talking with the priest, he goes into the deep temple archives. And he starts reading through all this sacred transcendental literature. And as he's flipping through, keep in mind this is before electricity, so this is where you have a Giwit candle lamp burning right here, maybe one right here, so you have limited light. These are old storage rooms that are darker and cooler to keep the paper preserved. He's flipping through, so if any of you have seen The Lord of the Rings, specifically the first movie, think just Gandalf flipping through these ancient 1,000-year-old books. This is the same thing, but it's Mahaprabhu himself flipping through all these texts, just absorbing all this spiritual knowledge. He comes across a manuscript, and he goes through and reads it meticulously over and over again. And then some of the prayers end in a very specific verse. Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami. I worship the primeval Lord Govinda. It's this verse that flips something on in Mahaprabhu's name. Now, obviously, Mahaprabhu is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, he already knows what it is. He's heard it before. But after reading through, with great ecstasy, he goes to the head pujari, the head priest of the Adikeshava temple, and he says, I found this buried deep in your archives. Do you know what it is? And of course the priest says, I don't know, I haven't seen that. Do you know how many manuscripts we have in there? Some are older than this temple itself. He goes forth and he reads it carefully to him. And he says, this is the lost 5th chapter of the Brahma Samhita. Are the prayers that Lord Brahma offers to Krishna as he has been, after he had been humbled by the Lord in his form as a cowherd boy. And he goes forth and asks, may I please copy these so that I can then distribute this around. And then, of course, he agrees. So this discovery is extremely significant because it is a missing piece of the puzzle. It establishes the Chinta Veda Veda Tattva, or in simple terms, the inconceivable oneness and difference of the Supreme Person in his energies. So the Supreme Lord has his internal potency and his external potency, the spiritual energy and the material energy, and the difference between the two, while they are still one and the same. So think about when we say we are part and parcel of Krishna. Think about when you have a fire burning, and a spark comes off that fire. That spark, although tiny, is still the same as that big flame, chemically and energetically. But in terms of the grand scheme and comparison, they're different. Or it's the same way if I go out to the Atlantic Ocean. I drive 1 hour over to the East Coast. I go ahead and I look out across at the Atlantic Ocean. Trillions upon trillions of liters of water. I go and I take a little eyedropper, and I put that little eyedrop on a plate. If I measure the chemical composition and all the components in that one drop of seawater, the parts per million of all the salt, it's going to be the same as the entire ocean. But is that drop the ocean? No. Good luck putting a whale in that drop. It's not going to work. But it's still one and the same. But at the same time, it is different. So this is that entire philosophy that these prayers encapsulate. And then, of course, with each prayer ending with Govinda Maripurusham Tamaham Bhajami, establishing Govinda, I worship Govinda as the primeval Lord. Does anyone know what the definition of primeval is? Original. Does anyone actually want to look up the, I know Visheshika Prabhu loves to do this. Does anyone want to look up the Merriam-Webster definition of primeval for me? For our kids, this is your SAT word of the day. Okay, we got a few phones typing. And then let's get a mic so that everybody can hear.
Definition from Oxford Lincolns.
Mike, please. Mike.
Oh, Merriam-Webster specifically?
Merriam-Webster, Oxford. Actually, let's do Oxford. It's more established.
Okay, Primaville. Adjective of or resembling the earliest ages in the history of the world.
So the earliest age in the history of the world, and that's in terms of what we're talking about in Earth's history. But then when you're talking about this, so the prayers, Brahma is worshiping Krishna in terms of all creation in the entire universe, says plural. So when you're talking about this in terms of universal creation, primeval is referring to the source of every single universe in this material world. And as we know from Shastra, or all the Vedic texts, there are an infinite number of universes, just as there are like an infinite number of grains of sand on the beach. And Lord Brahma, who is the creator of this one universe, is telling this little cowherd boy, who physically only appears to be 8 years old, you are the primeval cause of all causes, and I bow down to worship you as the primeval Lord. And later on, after Mahaprabhu copies this down in the text, if I could have a volunteer. Benjamin, did you still have that mic right next to you? I'm going to go ahead and reading this one for us. You can just do the translation.
There is no scripture equal to the Brahma Samhita as far as the final spiritual conclusion is concerned. Indeed, that scripture is the supreme revelation of the glories of Lord Govinda, for it reveals the topmost knowledge about him. Since all conclusions are briefly presented in the Brahma Samhita, it is essential among all the Vaishnava literatures.
It is essential. It's actually a very beautiful set of prayers. Now, when you read through this, obviously if you go to any ISKCON temple, you usually find it, but you also can find it online easily as well. Specifically, this 5th chapter is what this verse is referring to, what Mahaprabhu found and gave to the world. Now, when we look at the Brahma Samhita, this has affected the Hare Krishna movement, the practice of Bhakti Yoga in a wide way. And specifically for us, Srila Prabhupada introduced this to us. And does anybody know who the Mataji is right next to him? Mother Yamuna. So, Mother Yamuna is one of the earliest disciples of Srila Prabhupada. And there's another fun little, this is actually also technically archaeology, so in the Department of the Interior, anything that is older than 50 years is considered historical. So this recording is actually historical, but when the devotees were in the early days, they only had a center in New York and San Francisco, and then they went out to London, and that's where they met the Beatles and obviously became good friends with George Harrison and as well as John Lennon. Mother Yamuna Devi was singing in Apple Studios, not like at the record booth, but just hanging out in the studios singing. The Brahma Samhita prayers, Govindam Adipurusham Tamam Bhajami. So she was just singing that to herself, just out of pure joy, because she loved the prayer so much. George Harrison was listening, because she was just walking around in the sound studio. They were recording the Happening album, I believe. But George Harrison was listening. And he came in and he said, "Stop. Let me record this." So they got her mic'd up, and she began to sing the Brahma Samhita. And George rehearsed that. He got the bass to come then in a company, and then he had a drummer come in and play as backup. And then they produced these greeting prayers. Srila Prabhupada heard these prayers. He was crying. He was so moved by these prayers. The prayers that he knew that Mahaprabhu discovered to give to the world. And now, here is a record of that label being produced by arguably the most famous band of all time. And he said this should be played every morning in our temples. And so to this day, whenever you go for deity greeting around 7 o'clock, 7:30 or so, when those curtains open for the morning darshan, Mother Yamuna's song is playing. And it is such a beautiful thing to see as the deities open up, and you just hear this gradual orchestral procession of the Brahma Samhita prayers. So if you haven't heard it before, by all means, take a listen to it, because it is moving. And it's also something that's very different, because you're hearing these beautiful, ancient, primeval Sanskrit prayers, but you now have it backed up by a full Beatles orchestra. So it's actually really cool. So we will not go ahead and recite the entire Brahma Samhita, because there are a lot of verses. I mean a lot. You can ask Marisha. She, for her Damodar month, one of her vrats or her vows is to recite it every day. It takes time to do, but if you read them out and recite them, it's actually a very beautiful prayer. So, but Marisha, since you are doing the Brahma Samhita for your vrat, do you mind reading just the first verse of the Brahma Samhita for us? Chapter 5, text 1.
Ishvara Parama Krishna Sachidananda Virga Anadir Govinda Savakarana Karanam. Krishna, who is known as Govinda, is the supreme Godhead. He has an eternal blissful spiritual body. He is the origin of all. He has no other origin, and he is the prime cause of all causes.
Prime cause of all causes. So this Brahma Samhita, when you do have the chance, I highly recommend reading it. You can pick it up in book form or also find it online. But the book form is really nice because it does also have purports by Srila Prabhupada, and he goes in depth explaining each of these verses and how it affects us in our practice of Bhakti Yoga. And what I really like about it is these prayers, while being beautiful, they actually give you sustenance. They explain these different things and how we practice. It also gives us arguably the most detailed understanding of what the Supreme Personality of Godhead looks like. Many other traditions across the world, if I ask you what does God look like, the best usually you'll get is probably if you go to the Sistine Chapel and you'll see Michelangelo's painting. And it's an old man with a beard. That's usually the best you can get, but you won't get this level of detail. And that's something that's also really beautiful about Sanskrit. When you look at conversations, there's a lot of back and forth, but there's also a lot of detailed description. When people have conversations, they don't ask question, answer. You'll hear, you are the best of your dynasty. You have arms that are strewn with these silken robes. They'll go into immaculate detail explaining the person they're talking to, and then they'll have an answer. So it's really beautiful to have this conversation and listen. So I highly recommend, if you have the time, learn about the Brahma Samhita, specifically this 5th chapter that Mahaprabhu found. But we are on to our next stop as Mahaprabhu continues to travel all across India, and our next stop is actually going to the banks of the Pavana Sarovar. So Sarovar is like a pond or a small lake. And after Mahaprabhu went into these holy waters to bathe, he began to actually talk to the locals. So this is something that archaeologists also do. Not only do they study historic texts to understand context of what they are seeing, but they also speak with the local perspective. For example, is everyone familiar with Machu Picchu? Yes? One of the 7 wonders of the world up in the high mountains of Peru. The American explorer who discovered it was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And then obviously his discovery was shared with the world, and now it's a international UNESCO heritage site. But the way he discovered it wasn't through manuscripts. He talked to the locals and he said, yes, the locals told him there are ruins of an ancient city up on the mountaintop. We can take you to them. So archaeologists use many different sources to figure out what is reality and then where to find these places. So Mahaprabhu was doing this as he was traveling across India. So after bathing in the Sarovar, he talked with some of the locals because he heard that there were some interesting deities in the local area, specifically on the Nandishvara hill. So he's asked, where on the hill are these deities? I keep on hearing that are these forms that I can go and worship. Specifically, Nanda Maharaj, Mother Yashoda, and Krsna. So Krsna and his 2 parents. I want to see these deities. So the locals tell them, yes, they are there, and they have these beautiful curved forms. But you have to go up into a cave on the mountain. These deities are inside this cave. So Mahaprabhu put on his spelunking cap and went up onto the hill and found the cave. And after traversing through the cave, he came across these 3 curved forms at the back of the cave. And then there's a beautiful description of what he does. He goes down and he offers full dandavats. So Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu offered his respects to Nanda Maharaj and Mother Yashoda. And with great ecstatic love, he touched the body of Lord Krishna. Seeing these forms, he comes out of the cave crying and then singing the glories of the Lord. But he wouldn't have found these if he didn't follow proper archaeological procedure. Talk to the locals. That's how you find out about these amazing places. If I come around to you and ask you, what are the best places to go and see what Orlando has to offer? I have to talk to people who live in Orlando. I'm not going to ask someone who just flies into Disney World once a year and then leaves. I want to talk to the locals. That's how you understand your surroundings and get an appreciation for them. So that is Mahaprabhu's time as an archaeologist. But there's more to our sampradaya. Specifically, I want to go on to 2 of his disciples, Sri Rupa Goswami and Sri Sanatana Goswami. So these 2 souls are instrumental in a lot of special places in our bhakti tradition. And Mahaprabhu gave his disciples very specific instructions. So he instructed that both of these saints should go and excavate the holy places of worship in Vrindavan and establish them. When you go to Vrindavan, stay there, preach transcendental literature, and excavate the lost holy places. This is what he's telling to Rupa Goswami. O Sanatana, you should broadcast the revealed scriptures on devotional service and excavate the lost places of pilgrimage in the district of Mathura. So this is how we speak to Sanatana Goswami. So the Goswamis, all the 6 Goswamis, play a pivotal role in our understanding. Obviously, at the beginning, we mentioned how it is because of the Mahaprabhu, we know where Radhakund and Shyamakund are, but it's because of the 6 Goswamis that we have Radhakund as an established place to visit. Otherwise, you're going to be bushwhacking your way through the Uttar Pradesh forest in order to find Shyamakund and Radhakund. But luckily now, there are roads, there are taxis. I know the roads are crowded, but you find a good rickshawala, you can get to Radhakund with no issue. And then, if I could have Sunil Prabhu, if you'd like to read this verse off for us.
CC Original Chapter 10, Text 90. In accordance with the directions of the revealed scriptures, both Goswamis excavated the lost places of pilgrimage and inaugurated the worship of deities in Vrindavan.
So, in Vrindavan, there are 7 principal temples that are considered the main pilgrimage temples that you visit. And we're going to go through each of the ones that the Goswamis established and built. So, arguably the most iconic one, the one that stands out the most in terms of its architecture, is the Madan Mohan temple. This temple is visible because of it being situated on a hill, and then of course it's very traditional architecture and that beautiful temple spire. And then if you want to look at actual historic photos of it, it's gorgeous. So this is one that is established by Sanatana Goswami. We have others as well. You have the Govinda temple with its pristine architecture. Actually, this is only 3 stories. It used to be higher, but during the Mongol invasions, it was chopped down. But you still have the base foundation still standing. You have the Govinda temple. And because there's so many, and for the interest of time, we're just going to be listing them off, but mentally make notes of these as places to jot down as pilgrimage sites when you go to Vrindavan. You have the Sri Gopinath temple. And then you also have the Sri Radharaman temple. Architecturally, the beautiful Sri Radha Damodar temple. And if any of you have been to the temple in Spanish Fork, Utah, inspiration for the architecture at that temple. Very classic Vedic style. And then, of course, you have the Gokulananda temple. So these are the 7 temples that the Goswamis established, and they inaugurated the deities inside those temples for worship. So that when pilgrims come to Vrindavan, they can go to each of these 7 temples and worship them. So now, when you have your next pilgrimage to Vrindavan, not only are you going there to spiritually surcharge yourself, but you can do so with the cap of an archaeologist as well and say, wow, these temples were reestablished by our lineage and our tradition. And you can also appreciate the historical significance of them as well. So it adds more layers of why these places are so special. Now, if we fast forward a little bit, we go into a more modern lineage of our sampradaya. Not too modern, but we go to a very important acharya. We go to Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. So he is the father of Sri Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who is the spiritual master of Srila Prabhupada. So this is, if you want to think of gurus, this is our great-great-grandfather in terms of that type of lineage. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur is our great-grandfather, and then of course Srila Prabhupada is our grandfather of our practice. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur was instrumental in reestablishing bhakti as a respected Bhakti Yoga tradition, respected Vaishnava tradition. Because previously, since Mahaprabhu left the earth, Gaudiya Vaishnavism specifically began to deteriorate a little bit, and it became pushed off to the side as just like a little household practice. But through rigorous academics, Bhaktivinoda Thakur reestablished our bhakti tradition as a respected institution that had great philosophical depth. And he was very literate as well in doing so, because during the British rule, he was a magistrate for the British Empire. And they actually respected him so much in his work for maintaining order in his section of Bengal that they had a train station built specifically at his house, just so he could go to and from his province. So not only is he respected in the spiritual realm, but he's also even respected by the British. In colonial India, that is saying something. Now, him as an archaeologist, this is arguably one of my favorite things that I was digging into, learning and researching in this topic. So he was actually traveling across the Ganges. And at this point, as I mentioned, the Bhakti Yoga tradition was pseudo-lost to history. It had fallen away. No one had kept up the records and maintained a detailed record. So places of pilgrimage in Navadvip, in Mayapur, this area of West Bengal, were lost, actually. He was going around on the banks of the Ganges, and he was meditating. We do not have the location, like a fixed temple or a place of worship, for the birthplace of our Lord, Mahaprabhu. We know that Mayapur, Navadvip, this area of West Bengal, is where Mahaprabhu appeared on this earth. But we don't know the exact pinpoint spot. You know, just like how you go to national historic places, this house is where Abraham Lincoln was born. This house is where Martin Luther King was born. Like, you have the house, you have the little sign out front. Cool, you can stand out, take your picture, and go about your day. We didn't have that. We didn't know where Mahaprabhu's birthplace was. So one evening, when he is out on the river on a boat with his family, he sees a light off on the eastern bank of the Ganga. And that light, as he tries to focus on it, in his vision, he sees it's the shape of a very ancient style Vedic palace. And he's looking at it, and he turns to his son and says, "Do you see that? I'm not cuckoo." He says, "Yeah, I see it." And then they reach the other side, and they continue about their business. And then the next night, he goes back again to say, "All right, was this vision, did I see what I thought I saw?" Lo and behold, he sees it again. And then he begins to think, this is Godadesh, because it looks like the sun and the moon. This building is like the sun, and the moon is right behind it. They're rising on that eastern bank of the Ganga. And Srila Prabhupada actually comments on this manuscript that Bhaktivinoda Thakur is recording in his memoir, in his autobiography. And he says that there's the celebrated ancient capital of the Sena dynasty, which was known as Godadesh, or Goda. And this capital was on the central island of Navadvip. So Navadvip is basically this region of the Ganges Delta in Bengal, which is considered as a grouping of 9 islands. And Godadesh is the central island of the Ganges River Delta in this area. And this area is supposedly where Mahaprabhu appeared, where his birthplace was. So seeing this, and then reflecting that I see the sun and the moon rising from one spot in central Navadvip, let's explore that area. So, as a good archaeologist, he first makes sure he has good passage to get there. So he obviously has a boat, so we can get to that section of Navadvip. He then also goes through manuscripts. So, 500 years ago, Mahaprabhu was in West Bengal. This was also the time of Muslim rule in the area. And the Muslim magistrate actually kept detailed records of the layout of the land. Maps, understanding what towns are where, because obviously, think about even now, when you look at, let's say, a district map, you have clear boundaries like, this is this section, this is Azalea Park, this is Union Park, this is Goldenrod. You know, you have these distinct zones. They had the same thing back then, this, however, was on paper. And as he was going through his manuscripts, flipping through, there was already a town based on the newer manuscripts and current registry that said, this is the town of Navadvip. But when he compared those records to the Muslim imperial records, the town of Navadvip that was inaugurated there, he noted, this is on the western bank of the Ganges. And then going through the historical records of that town, he found out that this town of Navadvip had only been there for roughly 100 years. And that is because rivers move. Rivers are not fixed. The water will always move to the area of least resistance. So if you look at the banks of rivers over historical time, you'll notice that they shift, they move. So comparing maps from the 1500s of the Qazi at that time, he was able to point out that, in 500 years ago, the Ganga was more on this side of Navadvip. So the actual town of Navadvip over there in Godadesh was on the eastern bank of the Ganges. So that area of Godadesh was historical Navadvip. Excellent, we have our heading. Boatman, take me across the river. But before they get on that boat and they head on off, he needs one more resource. So he talked to the locals. He referred to historical manuscripts. There's one other thing you do in any field of study to confirm something as, is this true? Is this a myth? What's our situation? You consult the experts. You talk to an expert in the field. Just like when a doctor is about to do a surgery, or it looks like, I don't know if that surgery is something I can do. Let me consult an expert in the field, who let's say is a better heart surgeon than I am, who's done it more times, and I can get his opinion before we proceed with this procedure. So he brings forth Jagannath Das Babaji. Now at this point, his spiritual master is 120 years old. His eyes can't open anymore. His back is permanently hunched forward. He can't walk. He can only softly speak because of his extreme age. So he orders that, please carry my Guru Maharaj in a basket over your head. Because he's also 120, he doesn't weigh that much. So as long as, you go to the gym, you stay fit, see, we're already tying into Radhika Rupa's interest. You stay fit, you can do things like carry your spiritual master in a basket over your head. To be fair, he was probably only about 80, 90 pounds instead of full-grown 190 pounds. So it was a lot easier. But regardless, they carried him to the site. And as soon as they arrived at the point on the map where Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, this is where I believe it is, they saw a neem tree growing with tulsi manjaris, what you call holy basil, we call tulsi maharani. This tree was surrounded by them. Jagannath Das Babaji's eyes fully open. He straightens his back, jumps out of the basket, and he starts to say, Eto nimai janma bhumi, over and over again. This is indeed the birthplace of Lord Nimai. So Mahaprabhu was called Nimai because he was born under a neem tree. And he begins to dance and sing and chant Hari Bol, Gaura Hari, in pure ecstasy. Now imagine that. A 120-year-old man, straightened up, eyes wide open, chanting at the top of his lungs and dancing. And when Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur sees this from his spiritual master, he knows. The subject matter expert is in full agreement. We have found the birthplace of Mahaprabhu. And so, after discovering this lost site, they reestablished the birthplace and they inaugurated a temple there where now pilgrims can go forth and offer their obeisances to the land, specifically this exact spot where Mahaprabhu appeared on this earth. Now, later, in his Navadvip Dhamma Mahatmya, he writes this beautiful excerpt. This is only a small excerpt from this transcript that he writes. Listen to my words. Navadvip extends over 16 krosas. Within the 16 krosas of Navadvip, which are non-different from Vrindavan, there are 9 islands, which form an 8-petaled lotus floating on the water. In the middle of the 8 islands, or petals, lies Antardvip, and within Antardvip lies the very central point, Mayapur. The eternal pastimes of Lord Chaitanya take place within Yogapit, and the circle of Mayapur, the circumference of which measures 3.5 miles, and the diameter measures just over 1 mile. Because the Panchatattva are seated at Yogapit, it is the most glorious of all places. So if you want to read this manuscript, it's actually very beautiful. It's an 18-chapter transcript written in Bengali, but it has been translated into English, giving a very beautiful description of the 9 islands of Navadvip and their significance to us as devotees. And as you can see, there is our beautiful lotus. If you squint a little bit, you can sort of see a lotus petal that begins to form. Now, obviously, a few hundred years ago, the river shifted a little bit. And now he then goes on and he recites another excerpt. And this is specifically actually from Lord Nityananda Prabhu to a young Jiva Goswami. And Jiva Goswami is one of the 6 Goswamis. And I will like to conclude with this one before we go into the next part of our seminar. Very soon, by the desire of the Lord, this will be nearly hidden under the waters of the Ganges. Then later, by the powerful desire of the Lord, the Dham will again be revealed and shine effulgently. The eternal Dham is never lost, but is temporarily covered. And then again, it appears to our eyes. My worshipful Lord eternally resides at Mayapur, situated on the east bank of the Ganges. Although in the eyes of common people, Vishvambar, Lord Chaitanya, took sannyas and left Navadvip to go elsewhere. Actually, my Gauranga never gives up Mayapur or Navadvip. The devotees can perceive his daily leela. And you, Jiva Goswami, we'll also see Gauranga dancing. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur ki. So this beautiful pastime, and especially that excerpt he reads, and this is from Lord Nityananda, who is situated, for me, on the right side, but for all of you, it will be on the left. This is what Lord Nityananda is telling Jiva Goswami about the glories of Mayapur and the islands of Navadvip. Temporarily lost, but not forgotten. And then by the grace of the Lord, if you look for it and put the effort in, you'll find it again. And that, of course, is what Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur did. And then, of course, fulfilling that vision that he saw, that golden temple and the moon rising, Gauranga and Nityananda rising up and spreading across the world. And then, of course, in 1896, Srila Prabhupada is born. And then in 1965, on the Jaladut, Srila Prabhupada goes on that cargo ship, comes to New York, and then spreads Krishna consciousness to the Western world. Fulfilling that vision of Bhaktivinoda Thakur after he was dreaming about finding the birthplace of Mahaprabhu. This is all from just my interest in archaeology. Something that you could consider completely mundane. But taking an interest and then finding a spiritual aspect of it. Bhakti yoga is not just kirtan. It is not just chanting. It is taking every single thing that you do, every action, every breath, every instance of your cells generating energy. Everything is an offering of love to the Supreme. So, here's now where we flip it all to you. Does everybody remember what is the thing that you like to do? You as a person. And it doesn't have to be something totally spiritual. I'm not going to hold you up on that platform. What do you like to do? Does everyone remember? Good. Take a moment, and I want you to think, how can I find a way for my interest that I like as a person and find a way to spiritualize it? So I'll just help, get those gears in your mind grinding. For example, if you like martial arts. Do we have anyone who likes martial arts in here?
Yeah.
There we go. Come on. So, Josh, you should be dying over enough. And if you have a notebook, try writing this down. This is also a good way to keep track of this. But if you like martial arts, obviously you can go to the gym, you can practice under your mentor. But then if you want to spiritualize it, well, let's think about it. Krishna likes to wrestle. That's actually, wrestling is a devotional sport. Krishna and Balaram love to wrestle. The Supreme Lord himself. Now you could just read the pastime, like, okay, that's pretty cool. Krishna's a pretty good wrestler. But if you actually like martial arts, and you like to learn and practice, and fight and spar, look into the in-depth details. Srila Prabhupada, when he translated and wrote the Krishna book for us, he gave immaculate descriptions. He directly translated Sanskrit to English and maintained that in-depth detail of each verse so that we could understand it. So if you like martial arts, read Krishna's fights very carefully. So for example, the killing of Kamsa in the arena. Krishna does a double-fisted move where he grabs one fist over the other and brings it down on his chest, right here, right above the heart. And if you think about that in a martial arts sense, that will break bone. So it's a very vicious but also effective strike. So if you like martial arts, read in depth. Or the same way, if you like music, read about the different styles that Krishna plays his flute, or the tunes that Radharani likes to sing for Krishna's pleasure. If you like to cook, read how they're prepared each of these things. Don't just read, Mother Yashoda was churning butter. What was she adding to that butter? What spices was she using? Try to look for these in-depth details. So everyone take a minute, think about what you like to do, and think about ways that you can dig deeper into it and find a spiritual aspect to it. So I'll give you all a minute, no pressure. You don't have to share if you want to, but after a minute we'll go ahead and share around the room what we thought about. Think about yourself as a person. What do you, fill in the name here, fill in the blank, like? It could be anything. Coloring, cooking, jiu-jitsu, music, reading. And then can we have a few mics at the ready? So then, once you feel like you have got a good idea, first share what you like to do, just like the basic, regular thing that you like to do, and then expound upon it. How can you make that a spiritual thing that you like to do? So do we have anyone who'd like to go first? Go for it. There we go. Yes, Black. What do you like to do?
I definitely like to do dancing.
Dancing. Excellent. Who doesn't like to dance? Spiritualize it for me.
Dance in the Kirtan and in the Mangalarti.
Okay. Give me more than that. That's the
Ah,
basic
so-
devote. How can you specifically really like spiritualize your dancing in terms of the bhakti tradition?
So learn how different Maharajas like Radhanath Maharaj, like he talks about different ways, like you can do Mangalarti. Like there are specific patterns in the it's not supposed to be like here and there like that. Then you dance for the Lord. It's very synchronous, very beautiful looking when we do for the Lord. So like read those instructions very carefully and try to follow them like that.
Yes. Excellent. And a great resource also, if you go into Chaitanya Charitamrita and you read Mahaprabhu's time in Jagannath Puri, specifically on the Rath Yatra festival. So for those of you who don't know what Rath Yatra is, it is the oldest spiritual tradition in the world that has been going non-stop for thousands of years in Puri, which is on the eastern coast of the subcontinent of India, where Lord Jagannath, the deities, come out from the temple on these massive hand-built wooden carts, and they travel through the roadway. Mahaprabhu would dance with his kirtan party in front of the Lord, but read the detailed descriptions of how he would dance and how he would move. I always hold this description that Kadamba Swami used to describe how Mahaprabhu would dance. He would dance like a drunken lion. Think about that. Think about how a lion moves. It's very regal. And then think about how it's very drunken. Now, you can even apply that more, and it's like, okay, here's where I can apply a musical aspect. So I do have also some training in a musical background. When you move and sway, if you think like a drunken lion, you're swaying back and forth. That is in 6. For those of you who who are musically inclined, that is a 6-beat. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. When you play an instrument in 6, you sway back and forth. So from the script, when you're reading Mahaprabhu's dancing like a drunken lion, the kirtan is singing and playing the instruments in 6, where it has that sway to it. So you can move and understand the movements of Mahaprabhu. Kadamba Swami also would say he would dance like a firebrand, like a tornado. And at this time he was wearing saffron. So imagine a saffron tornado with all his chadar and everything spinning around in a circle and over. So you can read these ways of how he danced. And try it yourself. Because Mahaprabhu came as the example of an ideal devotee. You don't just worship Mahaprabhu, you follow in his footsteps. And try dancing like him, because obviously it's fun. But yes, thank you, Flash Prabhu. It was beautiful. Does anyone else want to share something that they like to do? Yes, right, Rupa. Mike, please. First, what do you like to do, and then how can we spiritualize it?
So does that have to be the thing that I said before?
It doesn't have, if it's something new, by all means.
I think I'll just go with the thing that I said before.
Yeah.
But there is also something like, okay, actually, can I go to 2 things? I'm so sorry.
Sure, no, this is
Okay.
a workshop for everybody to really get those creative juices thinking.
Okay, so for the first one, going to the gym. Who is more fit than all the inhabitants of Vrindavan? Like you can hear about like Balaram. He just like I don't know. At the gym, there's this it's like a red thing. It's like a sled kind of. And you just like pile a bunch of weights on it, and like I don't know. What I do sometimes I like pull it and then I push it, and it just like reminds me like Balaram. He literally got a plow and he like pulled 1,000 tons of pounds of just river. And I'm just like, man, that's so amazing. But you can like see just how like the inhabitants of Vrindavan, just what we do in our gym, how they did it on such a much better level. And you can like read about that and the details on that and stuff.
Yeah, before you go on to your next point, because I do want to hear it too. You can also think about it, like when you go to the gym, or like when I go to the gym, or I'm out on the soccer field, dashing down the sideline. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, I am the strength of the strong. So when you feel that adrenaline surge, when you're in the gym or when you're on the pitch, you're going down on goal, you feel that energy. It's like, take a moment. Oh, this is Krishna's energy that I am feeling right now. Spiritualize it. Also, soccer or football, for those of us who are civilized, is a spiritual sport because if you read Krsna book, Krsna and Balaram do play a game where they are kicking a ball back and forth between two teams. So I am just mentally preparing myself for one day when I eventually, maybe this time, maybe in future lifetimes, I get to return to the spiritual world. I am ready for that soccer game in the spiritual world. What's your next one?
I have I guess like a chemistry background, and I especially recently I started getting more into like experimental design and like just reading a lot about just like the little things, how everything works. And I guess kind of something that I've always really like dreamed of doing is like eventually like going into research and like just taking stuff from the Srimad Bhagavatam that we read about, but is not necessarily quote unquote like scientifically proven. Like something as like common in the Bhagavatam is like we are part of ourselves Krishna, and like that there is a source. So to like be able to like chemically like physically prove stuff like that, so that people can also like believe, because so many people are like science. This is the best science, but it's not in their terms. So being able to translate the Bhagavatam into like material terms.
And there's an interesting that you bring that up. Does anybody? So question for everybody, or especially like our devotees who've been practicing for a while. Does anybody know what the first small book that Srila Prabhupada translated was into English?
Krishna?
Huh?
On the way to Krishna?
Close, louder. Easy Journey to Other Planets. It's a small book, but Srila Prabhupada wrote that small book first for a very specific reason. Obviously, he had the Bhagavad Gita translated and was translated Srimad Bhagavatam and Chaitanya Charitamrita. But he wanted something that was attractive and spoke in terms that appealed to the scientific crowd, specifically what Radhikirtan was just talking about. And he goes in depth because at the time that he was writing it, physical scientists were starting to understand and discover antimatter. The fact that there is this, what we see, matter, but at the same time there's something else that is equally present and throughout everywhere. Antimatter. And antimatter has the nickname of the God particle. So Srila Prabhupada expounded upon that using evidence and references from Shastra, from scripture, explaining antimatter in terms from science into spiritual science. So that's why he said it's very important that we are able to talk to people on all of their terms. There's a really good book called Interpreting Our Heritage by Freeman Tilden. Freeman Tilden was an interpretive park ranger for the National Park Service. And when he wrote this book, it was a guideline for rangers, which I've read and I have been, to talk to the public. And one interesting thing he talks about when talking to children, you do not dumb it down. You change the way you deliver the message. The message is still the same, but you deliver it in different terms. And he says this also applies to all of your audiences. You never change the value, you just change the way you deliver it. The same way when you talk to people. If I'm talking to people here in the United States, I'm going to speak English. Si soy en Sudamérica y quiero ir a hablar en Bolivia, voy a hablar español. Ou si je suis dans la France, je vais parler français. I'm going to speak the language of the country that I'm at so that the people can actually understand me. Similarly, when you're talking about spiritual concepts, you want to judge your audience. Am I talking to some theologist from a religious chapter in the university? Okay, I'm going to be talking very detailed scriptural references from this chapter, this verse, we're using this intonation of Sanskrit to speak. Am I at a college program? Let's talk about this in ways that students can easily apply to their lives as they're going through their classes. Or am I talking to kids? I'm not going to bog you down in the depths of philosophy. I'm going to tell you all the cool stuff. I'm going to be reading you Mahabharata, but I'm still going to be giving you those important lessons that are being learned from that scripture. So that's why it's always important to know your audience and see what interests lie in there. So thank you so much for that one. That's a really good one. So who else would like to share? Yes, please. And
Hi.
what do you like to do?
Hot yoga, and
Spiritual.
we do have a moment, like sometimes where we'll meditate. We'll
go.
meditate, and at the end, and I'm usually chanting my Hare Krishna in those moments, but the meditation thing, it reminds me of reading of Krishna, going to the mountains and like praying and chanting and meditating forever. So stuff like that, I kind of want to get better at meditating. along with the yoga.
And then I'm actually glad that someone did mention yoga. A lot of people now think, and especially in the modern Western society, yoga has become very commercialized. You need this brand of yoga pants. You need to have this brand of incense burning. You need to make sure there's at least one statue of Ganesh somewhere in the yoga studio. That's the commercial aspect. But if you actually think about it practically, in terms of your health, taking care of your body, the body is a temple. You have to take care of the body that you're currently occupying in order to properly execute your bhakti, to properly perform this practice. I'm not going to be chanting great japa if I'm sniveling with sinuses and I have a major toothache, because all of my mind's attention is going to be on this suffering and I can't focus properly. But if I take care of my body through yoga practice, I control my breath. Pranayama is essential to control that life air. My body is in a very good sattvic, or mode of goodness position. Then, in a healthy state, my body is more physically able to do something. You're warming up your body, just like athletes warm up before they actually go out onto the field. You're preparing your body for spiritual life. So that's why devotees always maintain a very nice lifestyle. That's also why a vegetarian diet is so important. Having that healthy foods that you're putting into your body gives you an excellent jumping off point for spiritual life. So, thank you. That was perfect. Anybody else? This side of the room. Yes,
Hare Krishna. So, I like listening music and sometimes singing. Bathroom singer, you can say.
okay, don't worry. And then if anyone else, we all do it. It's okay. Sing in the shower. Let it rip.
So, to this interest, I try to listen more Vaishnava bhajans and try to memorize it. It helps me in understanding the past times, the way acharyas have seen it in their way. And like you gave example of Srimad Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he has written so many very inspiring bhajans. So that helps to focus on my spiritual journey.
Yeah, and music as an art form is a beautiful tool to learn. And obviously, learning all of these different bhajans, our acharyas, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Sri Krishnadas Kaviraj, Jiva Goswami, there's so many of our acharyas, our gurus in our lineage have written so many beautiful songs. You could literally do a doctorate on the amount of Vaishnava songs that there are. But at the same time, if you even think about it, on just a plain, regular old average Joe level, studying music is a helpful tool. Because as I mentioned earlier, when we were talking about Mahaprabhu dancing like a drunken lion, swaying back and forth, if you have that musical training in your background, what beat or what tempo, so you have 4/4, which is 1, 2, 3, 4. You have 3/4, 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 1, 2. You have 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 sways back and forth, so you can actually get, oh, that's how the music moves. That's how I'm supposed to be dancing. You can actually get a different form of appreciation for scripture and text if you have that musical understanding. And then, of course, if I talked about it earlier in the class, our Govindam prayers, our deity greetings, there's no kartal, there's no mridanga, there's no harmonium. You have regular drum set, you have a bass guitar, and you have a regular guitar. All Western instruments. And it's a song that has moved Srila Prabhupada to tears. And even when he was starting to play it in Tompkins Square Park in 1966 in New York, he had a bongo drum. He didn't even have a traditional Indian instrument at the start. He just had a simple bongo drum that he got from a music store. So studying music, even basic music, is really beautiful and an awesome and amazing way to deeply understand our tradition, because we are a tradition of music. Mahaprabhu traveled all across India singing. So why not continue it? Thank you, Rama. Anybody else? Any hands? Yes, madam, please.
So I need a little help here.
Sure. Well, first, what do you like to do as a
Yeah,
person?
that is there exactly. So I was thinking, what do I really like? And I was remembering when I liked what, and looks like I change a lot, or our interests change a lot. And it's like seasons, right? Lately I've been enjoying writing, and I read the same book that you were referring to, Traveling to the Other Planets, Easy Journey to Other Planets, right? There, Srila Prabhupada mentioned antimatter. He refers to soul with antimatter. So, and I like adding some humor. So I watch lots of interviews and shows. Nowadays, it's all about law of attraction, and all things came together. And as you said, spiritualize it. This is what came to my mind. Nowadays, everybody talks about soulmate. So it looks like Srila Prabhupada was talking about antimatter mate, right? So I think I'm able to culminate, but I don't know if there is anything else that could be done. Writing, spiritualizing is what I'm asking.
So you mentioned you like humor as well, right? Like comedy? Everyone here has laughed before, yes? Please say yes. Okay, otherwise if no one has ever laughed in this room before, that's a problem that I can't solve, but we need to fix. But our philosophy is not just, you are not this body, you are the spirit soul, this is your position on your way to... There's also humor in there as well. So also, when you're reading Shastra, look at the jokes, look at the funny parts. Specifically, if we want to talk about here in Orlando, Nityananda Prabhu is hilarious. Look in depth at how he messes with Mahaprabhu. Breaking his danda staff and sneering at him, going around with a straw in his mouth. Like you think like a Looney Tunes character, like a cartoon character just walking around with straw in his teeth, making jokes everywhere. Calling like the Panihati festival, the festival of punishment. Your punishment is because you're so wealthy, feed me, feed everybody. All of these different ways that Nityananda Prabhu is like poking fun at Vaishnavas, showing that devotees should have jokes with another, make everybody laugh. So looking for these things in Shastra is something as well to enjoy, or looking at Krishna and his friends, or how he teases everybody. All these little details, nuances. How do people mess? Like, look at all the hairs that probably Krishna made Mother Yashoda pull from her head. And we're in the month of Kartik, arguably Krishna's naughtiest phase of his time here on earth. Running around, feeding butter to the monkeys. I feel so bad for Mother Yashoda. Like, I can't imagine how she still has black hair through the month of Kartik. Just because of the nightmare that Krishna is giving her as a toddler. So for parents who have young kids, I bow at your feet, because that is a level of stress management that you are handling like a superhuman entity. So those kind of things as well. Look for the more, I know we are the spirit soul, but I say look for the humanity in the Shastra, or not humanity, but how, like the relatability, the real world application. Mother Yashoda is going through a problem that mothers go through. Nanda Maharaj is just fine and happy, like, yeah, everything's fine in my kingdom. I've got all of these cows I'm tending to. I have my beautiful sons that are taking care of them. Krishna and Balaram, look how happy they are. I have my queen. She is just the embodiment of love, and I could not be a more lucky husband. Meanwhile, poor Mother Yashoda is in the back, just trying to turn the butter. Oh God, Krishna's crying now. Now he's feeding to the monkeys. Now there are animals in my house. And then Balaram, take care of your little brother. Read Shastra, and also in just the fact just of pure enjoyment. Find these little stories. We have only 6 more minutes, so we can keep on. Yes.
So I mentioned I like cooking.
Yes.
I was curious if you have any recommendations for things I could read to.
Higher Taste is always the go-to because it is such a good one. Because it has the recipes, and it has, how many recipes does Higher Taste have? 50 plus recipes. There's another cookbook by Purvadas. We have it at home. Do you remember what it's called?
But I was thinking more specifically like some of the pastimes and
yes.
some of the spiritual teachings.
So, reading up on the Panihati festival, I briefly mentioned it, but the Panihati festival, it revolves around Chiradoy. And I don't want to translate that, that's for the audience. Chipped rice. What about chipped rice like high living food in India? Like if you go to a fancy restaurant, this is what you're getting with gold leaf. Yes or no?
No.
No. Chipped rice is like that's your street food. That's you go to New York, go to get a pretzel. It's like you're just cheap, easy to get food. The festival of Panihati though, Nityananda Prabhu organizes with who? Louder. Raghunath Das Goswami, one of our archaeologists. He sees them all the distance. And Raghunath Das Goswami had come from a very wealthy background, loaded with gold. He sees him offering his obeisances to this group of Brahmins that Nityananda is with, way off in the distance. And he's, look at this rascal, Raghunath. He's not even coming to greet me. He's doing it all the way over there. He walks over and he's like, today I'm going to punish you. Takes his foot and puts it on his head, which is the ultimate blessing if you have the feet of the Lord touching your forehead. And then he says, now as your punishment, you have to feed all of us. And then Raghunath was taking this, and oh, I get to engage all of my wealth and make a massive feast. This is gonna be great. I'm gonna get all kinds of sweets made, the best chefs, the best ingredients. Chipped away. Chipped rice? That's like me telling you, I want you to make me a 5-course meal with airplane peanuts. But Raghunath was like, okay. And so he goes and he gets the yogurt and his chip rice, and he's making all of these different combinations. Sweet flavored ones, savory flavored ones, sweet and sour, and trying to make as many combinations as possible to please all these devotees, to the point where there are people in the river waiting for their food. So it's a very beautiful pastime, and then we have a very beautiful Panihati festival celebration here. So I don't know what day it falls next year, the specific date, but when we get our calendars, it's in June. Make sure you're here, because we go really in depth in making all these different recipes of chipped rice and get extremely creative, as well as with the pots too. So they were made in clay pots. For these clay pots, we have some very beautiful, talented artists here in the community. They take intricate detail in painting these pots, and then of course we have amazing cooks at the temple, putting strawberries, a little bit of honey, a little bit of butter, ghee, maybe make something savory. I think next year we need some more savory ones. We had a lot of sweet ones this year.
That's the plan.
Savory. So my Guru Maharaj, Jayapataka Maharaj, he inaugurated it in Atlanta, which is New Panihati Dham. He oversaw hundreds of different preparations. My favorite ones that he always looked at, the Mediterranean ones. He made an Italian one, which had like olives and like tomatoes. Oh, it was so good. So the Panihati Festival, highly recommend. And then for Panihati, make sure you're all here. And if you're not here, you're in Eka Chakra in Mayapur, or you're in... Yeah, by all means. Learn the art of making chipped rice. All right, I think we have time for one more person who would like to share. Anybody else? Oh, yes.
I like organizing things. So I think that with organizing, it's easy to go like systematically through things and organize things. So you could use that by like systematically going through the Shastras and trying to organize Shastra in such a way to make it more easily understandable. Because sometimes it kind of jumps here and there and everywhere.
So interesting they said organization. So that's also another analytical way to look at Shastra. Specifically, I talked briefly about it. Look at conversations in a sense, it should be connecting. Look at conversations in the, like for example, Bhagavad Gita. Look at how Krishna and Arjuna organize their conversation, or even look at in the Bhagavatam. That just is one behavior right now. But look at how they communicate. For example, when Parikshit Maharaj is asking all of these questions, first he's glorifying. Or if you look at Prahlad Maharaj, when he's speaking to even his father, Hiranyakashipu, he first glorifies. Prayers, praise. Offer your respects to the person you're talking to. And then, interestingly, in Vedic times, you ask all of your questions at the beginning. You don't ask, receive an answer. Ask, receive an answer. You ask all of them at front, and then this person who's responding will respond to each one in kind. Also goes to show how degraded we have become in the Kali Yuga, this age of quarrel and hypocrisy. You can barely remember what one person asked you 5 minutes ago, let alone, gosh, they're asking me 20 questions, now I have to remember my answer for each one and respond. But in previous yugas, the mentality was much higher. So someone could go forth and organize their discourse and here are my questions, you are this person, and then they respond. So it's another way to look at how people communicate and organize their communication. Thank you. So, are you all ready to go to the central island of Navadvip and see the Lord dancing?